All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you all for joining today. We really appreciate you taking time to learn more about the FAFSA. So we're really overwhelmed by everyone registering and wanting to learn more and taking the initiative to just see the new enhancements that are coming to this application and how to better assist students and families. So welcome to the Preparing for the Better FAFSA Form, what high school counselors and educators need to know. I just want to do a quick introduction. I'm going to hand it over to Diana to introduce herself first.
Thank you, Julie. Good morning, everyone. I recognize some of your names in the chat, and I am Diana Mateer. I work for College Depot of the Phoenix Public Library, and I'm tuning in today from sunny Las Vegas, where I now live. But Arizona is near and dear to my heart, and the FAFSA initiative in Arizona. So I'm very happy to be here today to talk about what we know so far about the brand new FAFSA. And that's all I'll say about that, Julie.
More to come. Thanks, Diana. And my name is Julie Sines. I'm with Arizona Board of Regents. I'm the director of FAFSA programs and college access initiatives. So very lucky that Diana is joining us today to share her knowledge. As many of you know, Diana is kind of our statewide FAFSA guru with Arizona. Now that she's in Nevada, she's kind of covering both states now. So without further ado, just kind of wanted to go into making sure that everyone knows that there will be a delay with the FAFSA launching this year. So typically the FAFSA launches on October 1st. However, with all these new enhancements and changes to the application form, the application will be released sometime in December. We are still waiting for an exact date as to when that will be. So hopefully that comes down the pipeline soon so that that can be communicated with all of you. So just know sometime from December 1st to December 31st is when the FAFSA is scheduled to launch. However, the plan is to revert back to October 1st release in future years. So for next school year, just know it'll revert back to that October 1st date. This is just a one-time thing and delay with the FAFSA. The other thing we wanted to mention is that with the new enhancements come new terminology, new lingo. So many of us are familiar with the terminology and the things on the left-hand side, such as EFC, expected family contribution. That is now the old lingo, and EFC is now changed to SAI, which is Student Aid Index. We're also used to household size. Now that is referred to as family size. The other thing is contributors. So in the past, it used to be, okay, the student, the parent, the spouse, just know that they're all referred to as contributors now. Another big one is the student aid report. So the SAR, that was that report that students were able to see all of the questions on the FAFSA and how they answered those questions. Now it's called a FAFSA submission summary. Also, dependency status is now referred to as student personal circumstances. And another change is not necessarily a change within terminology, but just know that in the past, students were able to add up to 10 colleges at a time on the application, and now they can add up to 20. So students are able to double the number of colleges or universities that they're adding onto the application form. So just keep in mind when we do refer to these new terminologies, if you kind of wanted to use this as a chart to go back just to make sure, you know, what is contributors, you know, that is student, parent, spouse. What are we referring to as the FAFSA submission summary? That used to be called the student aid report. So the thing that we also want to let you know is that a new thing with the form is that when students log in to complete their FAFSA form, they will get an intro video now. So this intro video will provide them an overview of what the FAFSA is. So when a student logs in or when a parent logs in to do their portion, this video will populate, and it will be something that they must watch the first time around when they're logging into the application, which I think is kind of good because then students actually know what the application is, and it's good on the parent side because they know exactly why this application is critical and beneficial for their student. So just keep that in mind that this is something completely new on the application, and it helps with that FAFSA awareness piece as well. The other thing is that this application is now role-based form. So meaning that each person completes their section of the FAFSA separately. So in the past, it was that once a student logs in, they're able to see, you know, parent information, they're able to see student information. Now only the student will be able to see the questions that the student needs to answer. The parent will only be able to see questions that the parent needs to answer. the student will always be considered the owner of the FAFSA, but they do have to identify contributors, which we'll chat about in the next few slides. And contributors would be their family, their mom or dad, adding in information to their FAFSA applications. Also, students must invite now contributors to complete their specific section of the FAFSA. So students can no longer complete the whole application with minimal parent involvement. So it used to be you may host a FAFSA workshop. The student may call the parent on the phone and say, hey mom, hey dad, I need your information and input that. Now there's going to be an invitation process, so the student will not be able to seamlessly log into their application and complete that parent portion. There'll be an invite process that needs to be done before that, so that the parent can log in and get access to the information. So talking about how students go ahead and invite parents or contributors to complete their portion of the FAFSA, students will need, in order to invite them, is the parent's legal name, date of birth, social security number, and email address. So the first three items, so the legal name, date of birth, and social security number, needs to match what the parent put to create their FSA ID so that this invitation goes out seamlessly. If the student puts in the wrong legal name for the parent, the wrong date of birth or social security number, that invitation will not be sent out to the parent. So just know that the student will have to now know the parent's legal name, date of birth, social security number. They'll also need to put the email. If the email is wrong, that's not going to be an issue, but those three in orange text here have to match up so that that invitation can be sent out to that parent. And that legal name, date of birth, and social security number has to match exactly to what the parent input when they created their FSA ID. And we'll chat a little bit more about that as well, but just know that's kind of a key thing there. So the other thing is, once a student goes ahead and sends an invitation to their parent to complete their portion of the application, anyone identified as a contributor, so again, that's that parent, will receive reminders to complete their section of the FAFSA at the 7-day mark and at the 14-day mark. So if that parent didn't open that email, on that day that they had initially received it, just know that they'll get a reminder a week later and then 2 weeks later as well. So just kind of as a quick nudge to that parent to let them know, hey, you need to complete, Johnny's FAFSA application. He's inviting you to complete your portion there. Another key component is that the student, there's a 45-day window in which a FAFSA needs to be completed by all contributors in order to be considered a valid application. So by that we mean the contributors, meaning the student portion, the parent portion. They have a 45-day window. So if it's incomplete after 45 days, meaning that the student went in, completed their portion, and mom or dad hasn't completed their portion, they haven't had a chance to check their email, or they haven't had a chance to go into the FAFSA, and it surpassed that 45-day window, the student will need to start the application all over again because that information will be deleted. So they'll need to do their portion of the FAFSA again and start it all over again. So just keep in mind that 45-day window is really critical so that the student doesn't have to repeat the process, and also letting parents know that they have, within 45 days to complete their portion of the application as well. And I know there's a lot of questions coming in the chat. So just know that we will try to answer questions in the chat as we go through the slides. There's a lot of material that we want to cover. So we will definitely have a portion towards the end of the webinar to answer all of your questions. And so we'll also provide our emails as well. So if we don't get to your questions, we'll make sure to follow up with you as well, because we know there's a lot of inquiries and a lot of questions surrounding all of these processes. So just know that we will have a section for Q&A, but your question may be answered as we go through the slides as well. So FSA ID changes. So when a parent is creating an FSA ID or a student's creating an FSA ID, there'll be a two-step verification process now. So as part of that, they'll either get two-step verification by text or by email. So just know that that's an additional step within the process. Backup code generated upon FSA ID creation may be used when user authentication fails. So if they're unable to authenticate, there could be a backup code generation for that. FSA ID must be created before the FAFSA is started. So in the past, a lot of times a student may create their FSA ID and then immediately go into their FAFSA application. We're not recommending that at all this go around. We're recommending that students create their FSA ID well ahead of time, because if a student goes in and technically creates their FSA ID and goes into the application, all the work that they put in that application may be wiped out once that FSA ID is processed, because it's going to carry over any information from IRS, which we'll chat about. So just note that having students create their FSA ID now, and parents creating their FSA ID now, if they're able to, would be the most beneficial, because it's one last step that they need to do. And it also now can take up to 5 working days for the FSA ID to process. So doing it now would give them plenty of time to create that and have it ready come December when the FAFSA launches. Another big thing now is undocumented parents will now be able to create an FSA ID, eliminating the signature page. So in the past, any parent that did not have a social security number could not create an FSA ID, meaning that they would have to use all zeros on the application, print out the signature page and mail it in. And then we would hope that it would get processed within 6 to 8 weeks. Sometimes it did, sometimes it didn't, depending on how mail goes. Now parents without a social security number will be able to create an FSA ID. It's not something that they can do now. They will be able to do this starting in December. So anyone who has a social security number can create an FSA ID now. If a parent doesn't have a social right now, they'll have to wait till the FAFSA launches to create their FSA ID, because that process has not rolled out yet. The process for parents who don't have a social security number and creating an FSA ID is going to be a little bit different than creating a normal FSA ID. It will actually use TransUnion to create knowledge-based identity verification questions. So it may ask the parent, give them maybe 3 options and say, which street did you live on? Or did you hold a loan with any of these banks? So it's a knowledge-based type of question with TransUnion. If FSA is unable to authenticate identity through TransUnion, a process called ID proofing will be made available. We are still waiting on more information on what ID proofing is, what that looks like. But just know ID proofing would be if a parent is unable to successfully answer those knowledge-based TransUnion questions correctly, then they'd have to go through the ID proofing process, which we hope to have more information later on. But just know that's kind of in the works and something to troubleshoot so that they can create that FSA ID. FSA ID may be needed for both parents or student spouse if the student needs to access 2 federal tax returns. So FSA IDs may be needed created for both mom or dad, depending on how they file taxes. Married parents who filed separately, or unmarried parents living together. Again, we'll have to do the 2 FSA IDs. Recently remarried parent if the marriage occurred after the FAFSA tax year, or recently married students who filed separately in the FAFSA tax year. So we'll go into more information on that. We also have a handout that helps students identify which parents that they need to invite as contributors to include their FAFSA information. So just know that we have a flow chart that will explain this in a lot easier detail for you, because Diana and myself are like, this is confusing. So we've made it easier in a flow chart, which we'll share out. The other thing just wanted to share out is the ID match and verification flow. So this basically is a flow chart that shows, okay, does the user have a social security number? Yes, it's basically identified through Social Security Administration. And then they can go ahead and complete that verification process. If the user doesn't have a social security number when they're creating FSA ID, just know they have to do that TransUnion knowledge-based verification. If they're able to be identified and verified, they can create an FSA ID. If not, they'll have to do the ID proofing process. So this is just a quick flow chart to show you how the flow works with creating an FSA ID for parents with a social security number and for parents without a social security number. And we'll share this out as well as the presentation slides. And we've also created this as a separate handout. So this one here is some changes. So parents, again, are labeled as contributors. If a student must choose one parent to report because of a separation or divorce, the parent reported on the FAFSA is the one who provided the most financial support in the last 12 months. no matter who the student lived with. So the old way that we are used to is we'd always ask the student, well, which parent did you live with the most over the last 12 months? The new way is which parent contributed most financially to the student in the last 12 months. And things to consider here are, who paid for your phone bill, who paid for healthcare, who paid for, car insurance if the student has a car. So, just keep that in mind. So again, the old way is who did you live with the most? The new way is which parent contributed the most financially. So even if the parent lives with dad most of the year, but mom's contributing more financially, just know that you'd have to go with who's contributing more financially. And also be prepared with reasonable answers as to what should be considered determining financial support. Dan, I don't know if you want to jump in here on some of the crazy things that we've heard.
Oh, yeah, well, because none of you is laughing right now. I see a lot of people who are very distressed in the chat. So I will caution you at this point, don't be distressed, all will be well. But someone just asked, how does a student know who to pick as a parent? Well, it really is a conversation that they have to have with the parent. And many of them know, for instance, mom is paying my health insurance, etc. But Julie and I were laughing because we attended a training in DC. And one of the things we all talked about, our feely goody laughy for the day, was you could ask the student, where do you get more toppings on your pizza? Or who feeds you lobster versus macaroni and cheese? Please don't ask those questions, but they are indicative of the fact that this isn't a particularly easy thing to answer. But students are expected to know who is supporting them the most, and you can give them advice, but you certainly should never put yourself in a position of telling them who to choose.
Thanks, Diana. And somebody said in the chat, if Diana says all will be well, I am very reassured. So
all will be well. I'm worrying for all of you. Julie too.
So just keep in mind, the old way is you live with the most, the new way is who provides the most financial support. And as Diana mentioned, it's not for us to determine that, it's for the student and really parent to have that conversation.
And if the student absolutely cannot choose who they both support me equally. They both give me $6,532 a year. First of all, that is highly unlikely. Secondly, if you are encountering that, you are expected to tell them they should enter the parent who earned the most money. I know none of us likes to hear that, but that's the expectation.
All right, and then this is just a flow chart that we'll share out as far as, resources. So when students determining, which parents to report on the FAFSA, it's basically a flow chart to see, are your parents married? Do they live together? Yes or no? And then it basically goes through these series of questions so they know if both parents need to be reported, both parents and step parent information, or if it's only the parent's information that needs to be supported here. So this is just a quick little flow chart. So if you're helping out a student and you're not quite sure, this may be helpful here for the student or yourself as you're helping them, or just kind of identifying questions to figure out that financial support there. And then the other slide here is, so some other additional changes to the FAFSA are household and family size. So family size will automatically populate with a student, the parent, any dependents listed on the federal tax return. So now in the FAFSA, we used to refer to it as the data retrieval tool. Now it's the data exchange, which is kind of similar. It's just the data retrieval tool in the past would have a pop-up. So they would say you are now being directed to the IRS website. Now, once a student or parent creates their FSAD and they're entering this information, it auto-populates a lot of the information onto their FAFSA from IRS. And one of those is family size based off of dependents listed on your tax return. If a dependent on tax return does not accurately reflect the family size, the student will be given the opportunity to update the number of family members. So if on the tax return it's showing that there's 3, but really there should be 5, just know that the student will have the opportunity to update that. Family members definition mirror IRS, so qualifying child or relative, and then we've provided the link here to that section of that who's defined as a family member. Also, number in college no longer counts, although it's still asked on the FAFSA for college consideration of adjustment based off of number in college. So in the past, if a family has, more than one child in college, that would be taken into consideration into the formula. Just know that now it's not taken into consideration to the formula. However, it's still asked on the FAFSA application. So if the university or financial aid office wants to take that into consideration, just know that they can pull that up on the application if needed. Diana will go into more detail on that. Also, a married person other than parents cannot be a dependent if they file a joint tax return with someone else, even if they live in the student's household. Diana will go into more information on that as far as tax returns. Student who is independent only because they are married revert to dependent status if they are separated or divorced. Again, we'll have some follow-up slides, which Diana will talk about there. A lot of times this doesn't hit with our high school population, but it may be for continuing students or students out of high school there. So I'm going to hand it over to Diana, and then we'll answer some questions in the chat as well.
Thanks, Julie. I've been trying to keep up with the chat, but frankly, guys, this is the first time I've even managed a chat because I'm usually the one talking. So I thank Julie for giving me that opportunity. And I get to take over at the absolutely worst slide in our entire presentation. And that is what you are looking at right now. Part of what Julie indicated, a major change, is there is no more IRS data retrieval. And I am certain that all of you are saying hallelujah for that, because it only worked half the time anyway. But now the IRS data retrieval has been replaced by a data exchange between the IRS and the FAFSA processor. And that data exchange is automatic, and it occurs if the IRS finds tax data. Again, if the parent did not file or the student didn't file, the IRS will simply say didn't find anything. But the important thing is that students and other contributors, parents, spouses, etc., have to give consent at the very front of the form to have this data transferred from the IRS. That is why the FSA ID becomes so very important and why it has to be created before the form. There is very little, in fact, no opportunity typically to manually enter income tax data, AGI or tax paid or anything like that. This is automatic for those that the IRS finds their tax return. This is a lot of legal language that simply says, I entered this site with an FSA ID. So I am who you think I am and who I think I am. You have authenticated me. Therefore, I have the right to ask for this IRS data to be transferred. So that is why it is so critical to actually create the FSA ID before you try to go into the FAFSA. In fact, the FAFSA won't let you unless you go in with an FSA ID. You cannot create one midway through the process. So this consent form is critical. What if a parent does not consent because they don't want the IRS looking at them? They know they didn't file and they don't want to get caught because they should have. It's important that everyone offers consent in this process, because if they do not, the FAFSA will never yield results that can result in financial aid. Again, if they don't consent to have the IRS communicate with FAFSA, nothing will ever happen. The student is not eligible for federal aid. And I imagine this has made all of you pause a little bit and breathe heavily, because I know there are a lot of people right now that are a little distressed about what's going on. But trust me, I've been dealing with this for 6 months, and so has Julie. We think we can manage it. All right, we want to talk about changes in income. I know a couple of you out there have said, oh my God, this is so discouraging. These students aren't going to qualify anymore. Exactly the opposite is true. That eligibility has opened up somewhat for most students, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But there have been some major changes to the income section. Again, no more IRS data retrieval our manual entry. So the students who come into you with a big folder don't have to do that anymore, because this is all going to be automatically transferred. They may bring their tax return information in, but you won't have any opportunity to look for line 11 or line 22. That's all going to be an automatic data transfer. Students and FAFSA form contributors must agree to that automatic data transfer. That's that whole consent thing you just looked at. You have to look at that. You have to offer it, because if you do not, eligibility will not be calculated. The FSAID is the controller for the data transfer, so that's why we are putting it at the forefront with such importance. The government is very concerned with identity security. They want to be sure that the person asking the IRS to transfer data is the right person. So that's why the parent has to be more involved as a contributor than they might have been in the past. Single parents who filed a joint tax return for the FAFSA tax year. So I was married in 2022, but I was divorced in 2023. I still have to agree to have that joint tax return downloaded from the IRS. But obviously it's not right, because part of the income on it is from someone who's not even in my life anymore, right? So it's critical that that person have the opportunity, after the tax return is downloaded or transferred from the IRS, they will be able to manually enter their part of the income and their part of the taxes paid. So it's not really any different than it ever was before. It's just whether or not you are originally entering that joint return, and as the IRS will be, and then the parent corrects what portion of that income was theirs. The IRS is going to confirm if they can't find a tax return that will negate the need for a student to get one of those infamous non-filing tax letters from the IRS that took like 6 weeks to come. Now it's automatic. So non-filing letters are not needed anymore. The IRS either finds me or they don't find me. They're not making a judgment about me. They're just saying, I looked up Diana Mateer, I can't find anything on her from 2022, or here's her information from 2022. Some income questions have been eliminated, and this is a good thing. All those zeros that we used to put in. Did you have workers' compensation? Did you live in a clergy house? Did you get military housing? Do you get VA rehab benefits? Do you have pre-tax contributions on your W-2, where we had to look up how much they contributed to their retirement accounts? All of those things are gone. So the FAFSA really has been cut down to less than half the questions it used to have, and not, I believe it's 49 questions now versus over 100. And there should be no student who has to answer all 49 of the questions, because the skip logic I'm going to talk about in a moment on the FAFSA is still in existence. But there are a lot of things you do. You don't have to worry about those things we always said to the student, oh, I'm sure you don't have any clergy housing unless your dad's a minister. And they say no, and we move on with a big zero. Next, Julie. All right, there have been some major changes too to parental assets. And this is one area in which students might lose some eligibility they used to have. And eligibility might also be influenced, as Julie said, by the number of students in college. That is still a question on the FAFSA form, but it is not affecting the FAFSA formula. So no matter whether you say you have 1 or 20 people in your family in college, it only counts 1 in the formula. So that could affect eligibility for someone who, say, was supporting 3 people in college last year. And we could talk a little bit about that, because that might be something that gives you pause. But there has also been a change in parental assets. We are all probably familiar with the simplified needs test, which means simply that parents were exempt from reporting assets. And that's all it is. It's no longer called the simplified needs test. We're going to call it what it is, which is you don't have to report your assets. When does that occur? If your parental income was less than 60,000 and there were no fancy schedules that the IRS downloaded in the data transfer. For instance, you didn't own a business, you just had simple wages of 60,000, or actually less than 60,000, so 59,999 or less. You are exempt from reporting assets. You are also exempt from reporting assets if anyone in your household or your family has received certain means-tested federal benefits in the last 2 years. That would include SNAP, TANF, Section 8 housing, federal housing assistance, Medicaid, or in Arizona's case, Access, a free or reduced price lunch. And yes, that gives students a big out because sometimes free or reduced price lunch is offered to everyone in a school. But simply if they qualified for it, because everyone in the school did, they're still getting free or reduced price lunch. And no matter what their family assets are, they are not required to report on it. So it's either or, family made less than 60, or you got a means tested benefit in your family in the last 2 years. So that somewhat the reporting of assets has opened up a little bit, so more people will not have to report them. But what happens if you have to report them? Some unusual things have occurred this year coming up. And one of them is that I know we're all accustomed to previously businesses with fewer than 100 employees and family farms did not have to be included as an asset. Similar to the home you live in. You don't have to include that as an asset. But now the net worth of a small business and a family farm must be reported. And you can help a student with that. If they are an independent consultant like I am, working as an independent consultant for the College Depot, I don't own a business. I am the business. So I'm not going to sell myself. I really don't have a small business. I'm just an independent contractor. But if I employ 7 counselors who work for me, and I could sell that business to another higher education entity, that is a small business that I will have to report the net worth of that business. Net worth, again, for those of us who want to do simple math, is how much I think I could sell my business or farm for today, minus what I owe on it. And it is not required that you get an appraisal or you get a form that's documented or anything like that. It is based on sometimes gross estimates, but they have to be reasonable. But you do have to report any size business or any size farm. And finally, annual child support received. And a couple of people asked about child support. If the parent filling out the FAFSA received child support from the other parent, that child support is now reported as an asset rather than untaxed income. Okay, so if I'm filling out the FAFSA and I have to report assets and I got child support in the last completed calendar year, I must calculate the amount of that. That does not mean that the person who provided the child support should fill out the FAFSA. He or she may not have provided the most financial support, but they did provide some. So that must be recorded. Next, please. Okay. There are also some major changes in the formula. Julie alluded to the EFC is replaced by the SAI. And all I can say is what goes around comes around, because when I was first a college student in 1974, I believe that the SAI was what I got. So we're bringing it back again because we've never had an original thought, right? So student aid index is the most important thing for you to know. And Pell eligibility is going to be determined in one of 2 ways, which should benefit your students. The first way is that for the first time, you are going to be presented with federal poverty tables for the FAFSA income year, and I will show you those in a moment. They will dictate whether a student qualifies for either the maximum or the minimum. So if you have a student who comes to you and says, I'm not going to qualify, You know, sometimes they think that and their family made 20,000 a year, but they think that's a lot of money. You and I know better. But you can now show them the table and go, well, you'd at least get a little Pell, or you get a lot of Pell. So you definitely want to fill this thing out. So the poverty tables are your friend, and we'll see them in a moment. All other Pell Grant awards, anything between the minimum and the maximum, are determined using the SAI formula. And it's pretty easy math, folks. You take the maximum Pell, which let's assume next year it's $7,000. I like round numbers, but it'll probably be $6,930, right? So if the max Pell is 7,000 and the formula yields me an SAI of 3,000, then simple math kicks in here. The Pell Award minus my SAI equals the amount of Pell I'm going to get. So in this case, $4,000. So the max Pell of 7,000 minus my SAI of 3,000 yields my Pell Award. That's much easier than looking up these tables. And know that the Pell eligible students are going to get the best deal. If they get more money the first way than the second way, that the way where they get the most money is the way that it will be calculated. But this is a way to kind of make it easier for parents and families to know ahead of time what they might qualify for. And that's really important this year, guys, because again, the FAFSA is being delayed till December. It already causes angst. So the more you can do to help a student know what they may qualify for, the better off you will be. The awards are always calculated at the full-time level. And of course, if a student attends part of the year or they only attend part-time, that Pell Grant will be prorated, as will other forms of financial aid. Let's talk for a moment about students whose parents were not required to file taxes. Remember, I just said not required to file taxes. They will get a negative 1,500 SAI. What is that? We are not accustomed to seeing negative SAIs. It means absolutely nothing, guys, except a college or university would know who the neediest people were. They can't change anything, except maybe they might give a bit more institutional aid to the negative 1,500 than the zero, but they cannot exceed their cost of attendance. They cannot change the Pell Award. The Pell Award is the same at negative 1,500 as it is at zero. What if parents don't have a record of tax filing? They will be able to check a box on the FAFSA that they did not file taxes because their income was below the filing threshold. And if you want to know the filing thresholds because you are really interested in the IRS, we've given you a link here. It is important to know that you're not a tax professional, but if a family comes to you that made $75,000 in the US and they did not file taxes, you have to know that's going to potentially be a problem. Parents can also check a box that they did not file federal taxes for reasons other than low income. We don't really know what that means yet, and I don't think the government does either. We're not sure what happens next when you say that. You said I didn't file for reasons other than low income because I'm undocumented and I don't have an I-10, or I don't like the government, or I'm afraid to file because I'm undocumented. I'm an anarchist. I don't believe in a federal tax system. Whatever that may be, a parent can say this is why I didn't file. But whether they will be given any opportunity or any admonishment that they should have filed, we don't know what's going to happen at this point. So my best advice to all of you is something I've told you for years. Continue to advise students that the school financial aid offices may be required to document their answers to verify or validate them. And they may be required to resolve whether you filed taxes or didn't, and you should have, or did you file head of household when you should have filed married, filing jointly or separately? All of those things are still in play at the college or university level, and they are required by the government to resolve those discrepancies. So students should not think I sailed through, I got a zero SAI. but yet their parents made $75,000 and didn't file taxes, the chances are that student, until their parents file taxes, will never get $1 of federal aid. Next. All right, the famous charts. I love these charts. Julie knows I love these charts, right? I've given you a sample of only 2 of them. These are the ones you will encounter most frequently because most of you are dealing with high school students. There are about 25 charts, and you can see all of them. We've given you a link at the bottom of the form here that you can see them all. But if you only memorize these 2, or you only get them, these 2 taped to your forehead or given to your students, these are the important ones. And I want to highlight how you can use these charts. I am dealing with a single parent household and a family size of 3, my mom and my brother and me. You will notice that the 2 right-hand columns of this chart tell you how much my family can earn to get both the maximum or the minimum Pell. If I have a family size of 3 with a single parent making less than $51,818, I know I will get a maximum Pell. Kind of cool, huh? Now you can tell them if they make less than $74,848, or if they make $74,848, they will be permitted to get a minimum Pell. And then if they make somewhere between 51 and 74, you know they will get a partial Pell Grant. So I want all of you to see the power of this chart. First of all, these incomes have gone up significantly. So it used to be I'd see a family size of 3 making 50,000 and I'd go, I'm probably not going to get Pell, and I'd be surprised if they did. Now you know better because you're looking at this chart. Now I want you to look at the bottom chart, which a double parent family, parents living together, parent, step parent, married parents. If I'm in a family size of 3, I'm an only child with a mom and a dad, then I will get a max Pell if our income is under $40,808. And I will get at least a minimum Pell if the earnings are under $63,000. And anything between 40 and 63, I know I'll get some Pell. So I find this chart to be very reassuring for families because they're giving a whole bigger allowance over the poverty guideline to realize that we're dealing with things like inflation. Money doesn't go as far as it used to anymore. Why do you think there's a difference between single and 2-parent families? I tend to think, and we don't have a lot of time for speculation today, but I'll give you my thoughts and then I appreciate yours. I think they realize that single parent families may have additional childcare expenses. They're trying to make ends meet with more children. And I really believe that's why they're giving more of a break to single parent families. But remember, you are only a single parent family if you are not living with a student's natural or adoptive parent, or you have not remarried. Okay, so we can go back to these charts if you still have questions, but in the interest of time, we will move on. All right. Okay, miscellaneous questions. Good thing. These have changed too. This may not be so great, but hey, demographic survey questions are now on the front of the form because we figured that students didn't like filling it out at the end. They don't have to fill it out at all, but it's purely for statistical reasons, and they can answer as much of or as little as they want. The parents never see the answers to the students' demographic survey questions. So if the student wants to tell us they're trans, or they identify as a different ethnicity than their parents or whatever it may be, they can do that without fear. There is no save key anymore. The thing is automatically saving without having the students remember 4 more numbers. Student can list up to 20 colleges. That's great for our go-getters. Colleges and universities now report federal work-study earnings of students through the Department of Education's technical systems. So students don't have to say, I earned money in work-study. No high school student is going to earn money in work-study anyway. So that's just really something that financial aid offices will have to look at. They will have to document how much the student received in work-study earnings so that that student doesn't have those earnings counted against them. Federal work-study is financial aid. It is not true earnings. Students now can be granted provisional independence, guys. Remember when the student used to say, I cannot provide parental information. I don't even know where they are. And I can document that. Their FAFSA would reject and they would be directed to the financial aid office. Now the student will get a provisional student aid index, but they will still have to talk to the financial aid office and document that they are eligible as an independent student. That means the financial aid office will reach out to them when they see this provisional independence and say, explain your situation to me. Tell me it's because you can't find your parents, not because they don't want to help you. And then that's a good thing, because that gives them one more step in the right direction. They know if they follow the rules and they provide the documentation, they will qualify for something. And finally, if a homeless determination is made once on the FAFSA because of McKinney-Vento, because of a shelter or a high school counselor or teacher has certified that the student is living apart from their parents and has no fixed housing, that only has to be documented once. It will carry through on every application for the next 2, 4, 6, 8 years that the student completes. As long as they would have normally been dependent, they will be determined to be independent for subsequent years. So it's a little bit easier. Students don't have to keep proving that they're homeless or they were once homeless. Next, Julie. All right, so comparison. As some of you trust me when I say this is really not that bad. At first glance, it looks pretty bad, but the FAFSA will be simpler. It is fewer questions by more than half. You could celebrate that. Greater identity security. I don't know if we should be celebrating that, but hey, it's safer. And I guess I wouldn't want anyone downloading my tax information if I couldn't prove who I was. That's why my FSA ID is important. Questions that have little or no impact, all those big zeros all across the form, they've been eliminated. They didn't matter anyway. Definitions are more straightforward. It always was good to say, no matter who you lived with, who supported you the most. But we got away with a long time. Who did you live with the most? Because that was the rule. The rule has changed. And who gave you the most financial support is really a more straightforward answer. 20 schools now can be reported. No signature page for undocumented parents, although again, we're kind of stuck in limbo on that one because we don't know what it's going to look like yet. And the verification process for students and for schools should be easier because they no longer have to pore over a tax return to figure out whether or not the student entered the information correctly. It's assumed that they did because the IRS transferred it. And we all know they don't make mistakes, right? Low-income students may, in fact, qualify for a larger Pell Award. That was the real intent of this legislation, even though somehow or another it got all twisted up into what you see here. You can thank your congressman for that, but low-income students may qualify for a larger Pell Award based on those new formulas I showed you, because a greater amount of their income is protected and used. They don't have as much discretionary income. Stuff costs more. You only have to go out and buy groceries or gas to know that. Essentially, there are 2 formulas now to calculate eligibility, the poverty tables and the SAI, and the student gets the advantage of the largest calculated award. And that is projected to happen automatically. We don't know how it's going to work yet, but I feel very comfortable with this part of it. I think the government knows how to do this. Low-income families must report less data to prove they're poor. That's really the takeaway here. You don't have to keep answering a zillion questions. If you didn't file a tax return because you didn't have to, you don't have to dig through your stuff to say, I made $5,000 last year. So yeah, I qualify as poor. Now that information is automatically presented to you. Conversely, middle-income families may qualify for less or no Pell due to a couple of things. If I had 3 people that counted in college last year, and now I'm only going to have 1, and my student was Pell eligible last year, they may not be Pell eligible again this year. So one of your student's siblings may have gotten Pell, and now they're not going to anymore. Or the student may not, because they suddenly only can count 1 in college. And assets have changed the landscape also. If you do have a small business, like you own a little restaurant, and you could, or food truck, and you could sell those. I love restaurants, and I even love food trucks more. If you could get rid of the inventory you have and the assets you have, then you have a small business and it's going to count. How much is it going to count? It depends on how much I say I want it, but it could affect my students' eligibility. Okay. And back to you, Julie.
All right, so the other thing that we wanted to share out is that for DACA and undocumented students who are attending one of our 3 state universities, ASU, NAU, or U of A, will now be able to complete the CSS profile because they're not able to complete a FAFSA application. So just know that only DACA and undocumented students wanting to attend ASU, NAU, or U of A should complete the CSS profile. If you have a student who can complete the FAFSA, have them complete the FAFSA. This is only for this certain population of students. So just know if you have any students that fall within DACA or undocumented who are going to one of our 3 state universities starting on October 1st, they can complete the CSS profile. There'll be no application fee. We'll have more information coming from our universities, but just know this is an application that they can fill out to see if they're eligible for any university aid. So just keep that in mind there. We'll have more information, but we wanted to share that for this specific population of students here. Again, only for DACA and undocumented students, have them complete the CSS profile starting on October 1st. So this obviously comes out before the FAFSA. So if it's something you wanted to do to reach out to your population of students who are able to complete the CSS profile, just know on October 1st, they'd be able to do that if they're going to be entering college in fall of 2024.
And it's important for you to note too, that if the student is looking at another state school and they're undocumented, they're also able to use the CSS profile for that, as all students are who are attending a school that requires the CSS profile. The 3 state universities want to be sure you know if the student can fill out a FAFSA and they plan to go to their schools, do not direct them to the CSS profile. And for those of you who this is really scary looking because you've seen a CSS profile before, there is now something called a CSS profile light, you know, like light beer or sugar-free soda. And that is what these students will be completing. It asks fewer questions and it has fewer stopping points than the regular CSS profile. But if I am undocumented and I want to go to either U of A or Washington University in St. Louis, I'm probably going to have to do the full form, because even though U of A doesn't require it, WashU does. And if you have questions about this, you can ask Julie or me. We're finding out as we go. Go ahead, Julie.
The other thing we wanted to share is what to focus on this fall. So with the FAFSA being delayed until December sometime, really what you can do right now is have an FSAID workshop for your high school seniors, even your parents who are able to create an FSAID, also building FAFSA awareness. So making sure that you're communicating to parents and students what the FAFSA is, why it's important, how it can benefit the student. Diane and I have created the following document here on how to create an FSAID. So it provides a step-by-step guide on how to create it. And it also gives students scenarios on who should create an FSA ID. So who should be the contributor? Should it be one parent? Should it be both parent? If the student's married, should it be a spouse? Should it be the student only? So we've gone through different scenarios that would be helpful. So we're going to share this out as well. So just know that that's available. The other thing too that you can focus on this fall is, as we mentioned, if you have any DACA or undocumented students as of October 1st, they can go and complete their CSS profile. And then for all of your students, definitely encouraging them right now to complete their college applications would be a great time for them to do so. That way they get their college application in, and then come December, they can go ahead and complete their FAFSA. And then in addition to this training that we have, we're also going to have some additional ones that take a deeper dive into these processes. So take a deeper dive into the FSA ID process, also the FSA ID process for parents without a social security number. We'll have a FAFSA 101 that has an application overview, new features, helping students with the form, FAFSA 201 and verification. So these would be advanced topics, helping certain special populations, circumstances. And then on November 16th, we'll take a FAFSA data. So this is all of our new enhancements that we've added to Arizona College Connect. So all of these different 4 sessions, we created a FAFSA boot camp. So many of you may have participated in these in past school years. So this is a brand new boot camp that we are going to start kicking off on October 26th. So we'd love it if you guys would participate in these, because again, this webinar here today was a general overview of all the updates that are happening. So if you want to learn more and take a deep dive into each of these, just know that we encourage you to register for them. They're completely free. They will all be recorded as well, and we'll send out the links so that you can register for them. In addition, we also will have our 5th annual FAFSA kickoff on December 1st at the ASU West campus. So this will actually run from 8:30, and we've extended it to 2 o'clock because we have some national guest speakers coming from the National College Attainment Network. We also have some state guest speakers as well, breakout sessions that will be really informative and give you a chance to speak with somebody live and learn more about the FAFSA updates happening from our universities, our community college partners, and our college access partners as well. So just keep a lookout for that save the date and registration link because that will be coming in your inbox very soon. And now Q&A section. So we have a lot of questions that came through, and I saved them a lot for Q&A section just because I wanted to answer them live so everybody can hear them.
So we'll stay for a little bit longer too. I know we don't want to interfere with lunch, but there was a lot of information to cover. I had a question, Julie, about independence. And I'm not sure either one of us touched on that. The independent criteria that you used to, foster child, homeless, married, in a graduate program, legal guardianship, those have not changed at all. They just call them personal circumstances instead of dependency questions now.
And one of the questions came through were, what if parents are undocumented and do not file taxes? A big concern is, will FAFSA communicate with ICE or Homeland Security? I don't know if you want to grab that one, Diana.
Sure. We have been assured that privacy is king. So these organizations are not permitted by law, for what that's worth, to share information. So they should not be worried. But, you know, you can never guarantee anything in this world anymore. So that's what I tell parents. Do not be afraid, because we have never had an instance where anyone has been deported based on their status on their FAFSA that we know of anyway. And again, you have to weigh, I don't want to give you information, but my kid wants $7,000. You can't have it both ways. And I say that much nicer to the parents, and they usually come through with the information. If they didn't file taxes and they should have, they're probably going to have to.
Thanks, Dana. Another question come through, and I know we answered a lot of them during the presentation. What if parents live out of country and student is living with a family relative?
That family relative may or may not be designated as a legal guardian. This happens a lot in southern and eastern and western Arizona, where the parents may be in Mexico, but the aunt has legal guardianship. That student is independent. If the student is just living with the parent or with an aunt or uncle in the United States and their parents are in Mexico or India or wherever they may be, I don't want to pick on Mexico here, their parents are still their parents unless they have a legal guardian or an adoptive parent. So their parents would be expected to get an FSA ID, and they would probably be filling out the tax information with, I live in a foreign country and I did not file taxes there or in the US.
And we've gotten a lot of questions on the Pell charts. Dan, I don't know if you can just go through and give the example again. I think a few
Okay,
folks had
absolutely.
joined a little late.
Family of three. My mom, me, and my brother. The top chart applies. I know if my mom earns less than $51,818, I will get a max Pell. Wow, what an incentive for me. I might have said before, after talking to my friends, I know I ain't going to get anything, but I'm going to get a full Pell. If my mom earns $74,848, the maximum, we will get a minimum Pell, which might be $500, right? But it's something, it's free money. Anything between 51 and 74 means I'm partially Pell eligible. Let's look at chart number 2, the one that's below it, where I have 2 parents in my family and I'm an only child. So I still have a family size of 3, me, my mom, and my dad. My mom and dad can make together less than $40,000 and I will get a max Pell. If they make $63,000, I will still get Pell, only I will get the minimum. If they make between those two amounts, I know I will get some Pell. I just don't know how much yet. And you can't tell how much a partial Pell will be based on these charts. But I hope you see the power of being able to say to a family, how much did you earn? Let me pull up this handy dandy table and use it. This is the most powerful tool you will have this fall to convince people to get FSA IDs and to actually file FAFSA.
Thanks, Deanna. Any other questions on the charts while we have them up? I know we just got quite a few on asking.
I get so excited about these charts. I've been begging for charts like this my whole life.
And we'll send out a link to the charts. I apologize. I have to get out of this presentation mode in order to send it. So I will include it in the email as a follow-up to everyone. And it's also
that's right. It used to be across the bottom. I noticed it's gone. Okay. Yeah, you can look at all 25 of them. Well, independent student with child, independent student with spouse, dependent student with, oh yeah, these are the 2 that really matter to you at the high school level.
Yes. Is there a fee for the CSS profile? So there will be no fee for the CSS profile as long as the student's attending one of our 3 state universities and is DACA or undocumented.
And there is also no fee for the CSS profile for any student whose family earns under 100,000.
Correct. One question came through. Let's see. If a student is a US citizen, but the parents are undocumented and not approved by FAFSA, will the student have any hope of getting any money?
Federally, no. But parents approved by FAFSA kind of throws me a little bit. As long as they could get an FSA ID, and that is critical. They can't fill it out and fill out the paper signature page anymore, thank goodness. But as long as the parents can get FSA IDs, and if they had to file taxes, they did. And that's determined that they should have filed taxes, then they did. then everything will be fine. But if the parents don't fill out the form, can't get an FSA ID, didn't file taxes and don't want to because they don't want to be found out, then federal aid is off the table. This is kind of a rule that doesn't ever change. They might get institutional aid, but that might be unlikely also.
Another question, Dana. If a student's parent is divorced, but living with a boyfriend, and they have a combined household income, do they still report both parents if both adults support the household?
No, unless there's a legal marriage, boyfriend gets off scot-free here. And my boyfriend might make $175,000 a year, but I'm not married to him because he doesn't want to give up that money for me as his wife. But he doesn't count against my child because he's just my boyfriend. If, on the other hand, I married him yesterday, even though I wasn't married to him in 2022, yeah, he counts.
Perfect. And the dates that we shared for the boot camp series, just to clarify, these boot camp series are more for counselors, college access professionals, educators, not necessarily geared towards students. It would be too much of a deep dive for students. I wouldn't recommend you share them with students. It's more for folks that are helping students complete the application. Otherwise, it may be a little overwhelming and a little too much info for a student.
We have shared with you on the last slide some resources, and there is a resource that the Department of Education has published. It is 246 different slides in the deck showing you how the FAFSA works in a perfect world. But I would not spend a great deal of time looking at that right now because none of us deals with FAFSAs in a perfect world. And it might be better to wait a little while because there may still be some changes in the way the form looks online. You can look at a paper FAFSA, and students still have the option of doing a paper FAFSA, but hopefully all of you know that is not the way you want to go.
Another question is
25 pages long.
pretty lengthy. What if the student lives in the dorms and the parent no longer claims the student on their taxes? What does the student do for FAFSA?
Claiming on their taxes doesn't matter for the student. And now this is getting complicated. But let's say my sister is already at ASU and she lives in the dorms. And my ex-husband claims her on his taxes, but she still lives with me and I still support her more than 50%. Including buying her school supplies, letting her come home in the summer, paying her car insurance and her parking on campus, she still counts. So the dependents on the tax return are not necessarily the same as the family size, even though, as Julie mentioned, it's defaulting to that. So if you're a dependent, you're still a dependent, even if you are living away from your parents for 9 months because you're going to school. But you may not have been claimed on the taxes because maybe my ex-husband did it last year because I had to deal with him. I do it 1 year, he does it the other. This family size thing is very complicated, but the good news is that students will have the opportunity to look at the number it assigns to their family and go, that's not right. I really have 17 people, not 12. Or I really have 2 people, not 5. And as always, dogs, cats, other animals don't count in family size. Your brother and his wife who live there while they're saving money for a house, if they file their own taxes, they don't count. Unborn children no longer count. So if your student is pregnant and having a baby in January, God bless them, they should wait till January when a kid is born to file their FAFSA because unborn children are not considered in the family yet. That is a major change.
Then last question, just for sake of time, because I know we're going over, but do you know if the legal name length character limit has been extended? I don't think it has, unless
I don't think it has either.
um,
But it's critical to put as much as legal name as you can, to continue to, type that legal name in, even if you don't see it, because as Julie mentioned, legal name is critical when you're inviting contributors. Students must know their parents' legal name, their social security numbers if they have one, and their date of birth. And I know that's frustrating because I've never met a student who could tell me that off the top of their head.
well, awesome. Well, I think I know if anybody has any additional questions, Diana and I did include our contact information here. Diana graciously included her cell number as well.
You all have it anyway. And hey, I just stood up here, without all of you guys, I'm gonna drink beers and eat out of food trucks, right? So call me if you have questions. I'll be happy to answer them. Also by email. Julie's a lot busier than me, but she's available by email as well.
So we just want to thank everyone for joining today. We will send out the presentation slides, the recording, also the flow charts as well, the Pell charts. So you'll get all that in your inbox later this afternoon. So keep that in mind. And then obviously, if you have any questions or if we weren't able to get to your question, please email Diana or myself, and that way we can follow up with you. But in the meantime, we hope everybody registers for the bootcamp series. It starts in October, and then we hope to see everyone in person on in December for a FAFSA kickoff event. So keep a lookout for your inbox for more information on